Brad Hughes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for joining me on the White River Rundown.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, why don't we just go ahead and get started? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Springfield, Missouri. For a short time, we lived in Lebanon, but about a year or so not very long.
Okay.
Went to high school there, graduated from high school in Springfield, and then eventually went to Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, Arkansas for my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
I have a younger brother, and we moved, I guess, to Nixa right before I graduated high school. But I was looking around when I wanted to do my undergrad, looking for programs for forensic science. And Arkansas State was...
if you would move that microphone a little bit closer to your face, you're a little bit far
okay,
away there.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, you could. Continue. You were...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arkansas State was the closest school that had that actual degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there, and in pursuit of that, about halfway through, I was working in a research lab, doing the same thing day in, day out. I realized I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, and then decided to switch to criminology at that point in time.
Okay.
After I graduated, I worked for a couple of years at a bank, took some time off trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do next, and I had kicked around the thought of law school while I was in college, but wasn't fully committed to it.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, I decided it was something that I wanted to do, and took the LSAT, and then I stayed in Arkansas to go to law school at the William H. Bowen School of Law at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about growing up in Springfield. What part of Springfield did you grow up in? Northern, southern?
Yeah, my parents like to move a lot, actually.
Sure.
So just around the Springfield area. So mostly south part of Springfield. It was a fairly normal childhood, all things considered. My dad worked for U.S. Bank for a long time, just recently retired.
Mm-hmm.
My mom worked at our high school, actually. I went to Springfield Catholic. She actually worked at the high school while I was there in the administrator's office. So I got to, kind of see her every day, or if I needed something, she was just down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have a younger brother. He's 4 years younger than me. So we did a lot of kind of entertaining ourselves with playing sports together and things along those lines, just to kind of entertain ourselves around the house.
Gotcha. Oh, were both of your parents Catholic?
My mom was growing
was?
up. Yeah, my dad converted. I can't remember exactly when, but he decided to convert. They're no longer practicing. We're all still Christian, but we've kind of moved on from Catholicism and are go
The
to
whole family has?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. We go to non-denominational church now. So
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. What kind of sports did you play when you were a kid?
we played just about everything.
Yeah.
I started out. I think the entry sport for just about any kid is soccer. So we played some soccer a little bit, but I realized that wasn't necessarily for me.
Sure.
I switched over more to baseball, played that t-ball, coach pitch, all that kind of stuff all the way up.
Mm-hmm.
And then tried out Mighty Mites, played that for a little bit.
What is Mighty Mites?
It's just youth football.
Oh, okay.
Basically, yeah,
Gotcha.
for younger kids. We didn't have necessarily any sort of school programs when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Until we got to junior high. So we just had it's kind of like a rec league, I guess, for little kids. So played some football, and then continued through high school. Basically, played some basketball as well, I guess. But I started high school playing everything, and then I had the tailbone surgery my freshman year, which kind of took me out of football. They advised, probably not a good idea to play that contact sport anymore.
Yeah.
I could make do with it for baseball, so I played baseball throughout high school.
What exactly happened to your tailbone that you...
Yeah, so I had a pilonidal cyst, is what it's called.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it wasn't actually a sports injury.
It wasn't an injury,
Okay,
no.
right.
It was just...
I was like, man.
Yeah, it was something hereditary,
Gotcha.
so it wasn't anything that I injured while I was playing. But once that surgery happened, they said you could probably do it, but with the high contact volume of football, probably not a great idea to get out there and do that. So I kind of put that on the back burner and then just focused on baseball throughout my career. And I also bowled, I guess, from a youth on. So
Gotcha.
spent a lot of time at the bowling alley on Saturday mornings.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about your law career. You were saying you graduated from a university in Arkansas.
Yes.
University of Arkansas?
University of Arkansas at
Okay.
Little Rock.
At Little Rock.
Yep,
Okay.
UALR. I graduated from there in 2015 with honors at that point in time after it just worked through kind of the regular 3-year program, went full-time, got done with that. I always had in my mind, I always knew I wanted to come back to Missouri. I didn't intend on being in Arkansas as long as I was. It was kind of, let's go down there for college and then we'll come back once I get my degree and I can find a job up here. You know, I know the Highway Patrol Crime Lab, they have kind of those forensic science positions, the lab techs, where I could have found a job. But after my switch, obviously I wasn't really sure what that held in store for me.
Right.
So I stayed in Arkansas where I developed my friendships and things like that throughout my time in college, and then just decided to stay down there for law school as well. So, but again, I always had the idea, I always knew that I was going to come back to Missouri. Just took a little bit longer than I think I originally planned.
Sure. Tell me about being a lab tech and what that all entailed. Like, you know, I mean, this was obviously something you were interested in. Was that something you were more interested from a younger age?
Not necessarily. It kind of developed middle school-ish. Mm-hmm. You know, all the popular shows, CSI,
right?
You know, Criminal Minds. Those were kind of the influences for me. Mm-hmm. Of course, they make it way more drama than it actually is in real life. But that science was still cool to me.
Yeah,
and I was still interested in that. You know, being a lab tech and having that experience, it wasn't necessarily a bad experience. It just was something to me where I thought, you know, I don't really want to come in here and do the exact same thing just every day
in, day
forever,
out.
Basically.
The same experiment to see if
you're looking at the
XYZ.
same you're looking at the same kind of things just kind of over and over, doing the same kind of tests, and it may be differences here and there, but for the most part you're doing the same thing. But it was interesting. I mean, we got to work with a lot of cool chemicals while I was in there. I actually, one time I think I mixed something wrong, kind of backwards, and it was a pretty thick plastic bottle, and I had it under the hood for protection, and it ended up exploding in my hand, basically. And had a little spot land on my cheek, and I had to go over to the eye washers and spend a lot of time there kind of rinsing that off to make sure that nothing happened beyond that incident. So that wasn't what changed it for me. I think I had decided before then, but that was an interesting experience that I had in the lab, and it was a good time. It just wasn't. I realized it was something that wasn't for me, and I'm glad I was able to find it out then rather than later on down the road.
Sure. So you came back to Missouri. You found a job here?
I did. So I came out of law school. I had interned for a law firm in Springfield between my second and third year of law school. They were willing, once I graduated, to let me office share with them, which is just essentially share their office space. It wasn't going to be, I was joining their firm. We've got some space, you can have it, but you're going to be your own entity, basically, your own law firm at that point in time. Then I got the opportunity to apply and interview with the public defender's office, where these two lawyers, they actually both came from that system. I interviewed, I got offered a job in Ava at that point in time, and so I went and talked to them to kind of get their advice. They said, we'd love to have you here, but if you really want courtroom experience, you need to go to the public defender's office. That's going to be your way to go. You're guaranteed clients, you're guaranteed experience, and that's going to be the best route probably just to get your foot in the door. So that's what I did. I took a job in Ava, but I was living in Springfield at the time, so I was driving an hour plus one way.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a heck of a drive.
Yeah, it was. So twice a day I worked there. I was stationed in that office for about 2.5 years or so. So I made that drive back and forth. I eventually transferred up to Springfield. While I was in Ava, though, I was taking conflict cases. So if the public defender's office has a conflict where they're representing two people charged in the same crime, they won't keep both of them necessarily in that same office. So they would ship them to Ava, and then I would come over here to Taney County. And so that's where I really got introduced to the area, the county, the judges, the system down here while working in Ava. Then I transferred to Springfield. And at that point in time, the Springfield office, well, they still do, but they deal with, well, I guess they are in control of the Greene County courts, Christian County, and Taney County. So the public defenders in the Springfield office handle those areas, and each area has a certain number of attorneys assigned to it. I was assigned to Taney County, I think just because my familiarity with the area and having already practiced down here for a while with my cases from Ava. And so they kept me on board there. And I worked at that office for almost another year. I had a friend of mine who was moving to Hawaii, actually, and he worked with a private firm in Ozark at the time. He was a partner in that firm. And so since he was leaving, he did the majority of their criminal defense type work. And so they asked me if I wanted to come on and just kind of slot in and take his space. They were looking for somebody who already knew criminal law and could basically just jump in and take those cases and run with them. But while I was there, I got to do a little bit of family law as well, so I kind of dabbled in that. But then after that, it was in 2020, end of 2019, first part of 2020. I really felt a shift kind of inside of me and in what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I started exploring opportunities in prosecution.
Did it just kind of shift in you occur during any particular life events?
No, not necessarily.
Really? Okay.
No, not necessarily. There's not one thing that kind of stuck out.
Gotcha.
It was more of just having been in criminal defense for, I say for that long, but for, almost, I guess, 5 years at that point in time. Mm-hmm. I felt like I wanted to make a difference on the prosecution side of things and help victims who were going through terrible times in their lives.
Right.
And so that was just more of the shift. There's not one moment that I can necessarily point to. But at that point in time, I started exploring prosecution opportunities. And there was a guy who worked at the Taney County Prosecutor's office that I had known who had done both defense and then made the switch to prosecution. So I was asking him what his thoughts were and just what the transition was like. And he basically said, well, I didn't know you were looking. And I said, well, yeah, I am. And he said, well, we actually have a job open here at our office. Mm-hmm. And of course, again, with being taking cases down here, I'd gotten to know the assistant prosecutors. I'd gotten to know Mr. Duston through my time as well. And so I turned in an application and had an interview with Dub, and he hired me, and I started at the office in June of 2020. Mm-hmm. So kind of a roundabout way to get to kind of where I'm at now.
Sure.
But that's a little bit about just, I guess, my journey and kind of how I ended up here.
Gotcha. What do I want to ask you about next? I don't know. You're blazing through this, man. Like we're only like 15 minutes. I guess I can
slow down if I say anything that you.
No, you're good. I like I said, I like to try to keep the kind of first hour more personal-ish. Yeah. But I mean, what are some hobbies and interests you have?
So I'm still really big into sports.
Cool. Yeah. You follow college football or major league stuff more? I mean,
a little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, I don't really basketball. I'll pay attention to March Madness. Mm-hmm. Don't really pay too much attention to the NBA. But when I was in Jonesboro, that's about an hour away from Memphis. Mm-hmm. So the Grizzlies are there, and they weren't very good at the time. And we could go watch games for pretty cheap. So that was kind of cool. We would plan our trips over to Memphis based on who they were playing, mm-hmm. rather than the Grizzlies themselves. So I mean, I got to see Kobe come in. Shaq, Carmelo Anthony, some people like that, some of the legends that came through there. We'd sit kind of up top, but it was cheap enough then at that point in time for, a night of entertainment and getting to see some of the great basketball players play. So, but I'll pay attention to March Madness. College football, Mizzou fan, still follow Arkansas State. They're the Red Wolves. Mm-hmm. So I'll still pay attention to them. And then pro, I like the Cardinals. I am a Denver Broncos fan. I know that's not super popular in the area, but
sure.
I claim them, and even when they weren't, doing better like they have been the past couple of years. And I'm a big hockey fan as well.
Interesting.
So yeah, the St. Louis Blues. I love going to their games. I was in elementary school, I would say, and we went to one of their games. My dad got some tickets through his work through the bank, and we got the opportunity to go. And it was one of those things that I was never really interested in before. But after that experience, it just kind of took off and, just kind of picked up the game here and there. And I follow it pretty religiously at this point in time.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, not a whole lot of hockey fans down this way.
No, there's not. Yeah, and it's, I think I remember when I was younger, a lot of the kids would kind of describe it as, soccer on ice. Because it's just a lot of back and forth. Mm-hmm. But it really took getting into it. And then we had a guy move in third grade, a kid, he was from Detroit. And so he was a Red Wings fan. Mm. Hockey's big up in the north. And so
sure. Yeah.
Got the opportunity to sit down with him and kind of have some conversations about it and, learn more after my experience of going, pick his brain a little bit on exactly what it was like and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was an interesting kind of how I got into it, but it's just something I've picked up and followed ever since.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you still play at all?
Not really, no.
Have you considered? I know there's like a softball thing going on right now locally, but I don't know if you're interested or we're going to participate or not. But.
Yeah, sometimes. Obviously, been a little bit busy this summer. We'll see what the fall has in store. I'm not opposed to it. We've kind of played in some tournaments with some of my friends throughout the years, but nothing that I do, league-wise or regularly or anything along those lines. I mentioned earlier bowling. I'll get out and bowl every now and then. That's something that is enjoyable, and I can still kind of do a little bit. I'm not as good as I used to be, but
Yeah. Do you play any instruments? Do you do anything like that? Do you have any other hobbies or interests?
I don't play any instruments, unfortunately. I would like to play the guitar at some point in time. I just never picked it up and learned how to play it, but that's something that I think I would like to do at some point. So
Fair enough.
But no, I've never. I played the saxophone when I had to choose between band or choir when I was in school. But that's been about the extent of it. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my wife and I like to travel when we can. We've got 3 dogs at home, so we just kind of like to hang out with them and watch movies and just kind of relax in our off time.
Where have you traveled to? What's been some of your favorite places you've been to?
Oh, we went to Seattle. That was pretty cool. Actually, last fall we went out to Denver and got to catch a game.
Nice.
It was a Monday night game.
Okay.
Against the Bengals, 28-3, I think was the final. So it was a good night to be there. And then after that, we kind of took off since we were out that way and saw some of Utah, some of Arizona. Antelope Canyon was pretty cool.
Very
so
cool.
those are probably the 2 highlights that
Have you
we've
been to
taken.
Zion?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on the list.
That's one of my favorites. So my wife and I went out a couple years back when we didn't have the baby yet.
Okay.
We did something called the Grand Circle. It's really kind of only accessible or like makes sense if you start basically from the East Coast or Missouri, this kind of area. But if you loop down, we hit Guadalupe Peak, circled up. It's only like 10 miles to what's the caverns? Why can't I think of the canyon, the largest cave network in the United States that's easily accessible.
I'm drawing a blank too.
Why can't I think of the name? The Cavern National Park that's like literally 10 miles from Guadalupe Peak National Park in Texas. And then from there we went to Utah. No, we went to Arizona because we wanted to go see a friend. Then we circled back to New Mexico, saw Saguaro. We did Zion. We did the Grand Canyon. We did... and then I think we hit Bryce Canyon, and there was a couple others as well. But anyway, we hit the one in Colorado, the Pueblo in Mesa Verde.
Yes,
that's what it was.
Yeah. It was right on the tip of my nose. I knew it was Mesa something, but I couldn't think of.
Anyway, it was a really cool trip. We did it in January because my wife worked shows at the time.
Okay.
And so that was kind of our off season.
Yeah.
And it was great because there wasn't that many people around, and we got to go on Zion. We got to do Angel's Landing, and you have to like enter into a lottery to even be able to walk on the trail.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. There's like chains, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad if you can, generally get around and hike. But,
sure.
It is 3 feet over and it's a 1,500-foot drop. It's but it's really cool. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah.
But we got to actually go pretty much for sure because there was nobody around. It was the middle of winter, and but it was awesome.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend.
I think
Zion was our favorite.
I'm trying to remember. I think we may have stopped there. We were kind of on a whirlwind trip where we were trying to cram a lot into a few days.
We did the same thing.
And I think we may have stopped. Is that and I may sound ignorant, but is that where the Watchman Trail is?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember. That may have been. I think that was one that we done. I think that's where it was at. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
I know it's mostly Mormon themed. That particular naming convention of the Zion National Park. It's like the 3 elders, and they like named the 3 rocks. Isaac, Jacob, and anyway, but
yeah, because we did Arches and
we did
Antelope Canyon and then the Grand Canyon.
Very cool.
And then Antelope Canyon as well, which was probably that's the one. If you're not familiar, it's the one where a lot of the computer screensavers come from, with the red rocks and the formations and
Really?
stuff. Yeah.
Huh.
It's actually pretty cool because as you're on the tour guide will actually take your phone and set the settings just right, get the angle for the picture, and then you basically
have you on a Windows.
Yeah, you basically have that on your phone.
That's
So,
great. That's
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it was a cool trip.
Tell me about your wife. How did you two meet?
We actually met through a mutual friend of ours.
Mm-hmm.
I was so the private firm that I worked for, she was gracious enough to treat us to company trips every year if we were meeting certain goals within the firm, as far as I think it was basically earnings basically for the year. She would take the staff on company trips, and we were going to. She actually took us to Hawaii.
Nice.
Super grateful for, and I was wanting to kind of surprise my coworkers and have shirts made. Matching shirts,
Nice.
just kind of show up at the airport. Here you go. And this mutual friend had a friend who made shirts, and it happens to now be my wife. So that's how we met and just hit it off basically instantly. And here we are. We've been married for almost 6 years now. We got married in September of 2020.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
April and I got married in September of 2020.
Okay. What date?
The 19th.
Okay. We were the 26th.
Okay.
So a week later.
Missed it by a week. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So you
Very
have
cool.
the experience of the pandemic wedding as well?
Yes, I did. And we had it all set up with a particular church, and just like a month out, they were like, "Hey, you can still have the wedding, but you can't serve food." And we were like, "Okay, like what about prepackaged food? Like what if we went to McDonald's and everybody got their own individually wrapped sandwich?" And they were like, "Nope. We can't take liability.
Interesting.
Like, we can't do it." We were like, "What about moon pies?" Anyway, they weren't having it, and so we had to change venues.
Yeah.
It was like, what else are you gonna do? I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, God totally worked it out.
That's awesome.
Some friends chipped in and gave us more money than we needed, and we were able to go get a venue. And the venue we got was gonna have a bluegrass concert that day on our date, but the bluegrass concert canceled because of COVID. And so, like, I don't know, man. You can't make this stuff up. Like everything just worked out just right, and they were outside of city limits, so they didn't have any food restrictions.
Okay.
They didn't have, and so we were able to make our own food, which we had some friends who were amazing and helped us out and served food for us. But total whirlwind. But
yeah,
it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was
Did you all go back and forth on whether or not to keep it or whether to reschedule?
The same date?
Yeah.
Or to
move it back. I mean, we had kind of people asking us, like, hey, what are you going to do?
Well, we were like, well, shoot, we got to find a venue. And then some of the only venues we could find were like the next day or the day before. And it's like, are we going to, we're not going to change all our invitations. We're just going to, but yeah. And of course we had a couple, it wasn't that big of a deal, but we had some things already printed and,
sure,
made up that had our date and would have been wrong. And we would have, but anyway, it all worked out.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful. And
I'm sure you saw probably people around that same time. They were, everybody was changing their date because they didn't want to have it during that time. And we saw everybody, and we were just like, we're just gonna hold strong with where we're at. We're gonna keep our date, and I mean, there's no point in moving it back. And
there was no like real thought in my mind about let's wait another year or anything like that. It was, shoot, man, we dated for 7 years before we got married.
Okay.
So, I promised her dad I wouldn't marry her until she graduated college, and then. Unfortunately, he passed away, and I was like, "Well, I'm still gonna wait. I'm not gonna." Anyway, but
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, you guys been married for 6 years now.
Yep.
And still doing traveling around.
Yeah,
somewhat.
Whenever we can. That's one of the things that I think we like to do together. We don't necessarily, do gifts or anything for birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas.
Just save it all up, and
we like to have more of experiences than anything else. So
sure,
that's one thing that we've done. Also, we've got everything kind of crammed in the month of September, at least for us. My birthday's on the 8th. Hers is on the 12th.
Okay. And
then our anniversary is on the 26th. So we kind of got everything right there that we can group together and just do kind of one big thing rather than, 3 little things to kind of celebrate everything that we've got going on in September.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's one thing that we like to do. And we like to, even if it's, it doesn't have to be anything extravagant, even if it's just getting away for, a weekend or going somewhere that we've never been or taking a day trip just to see something that we've not seen before and then come back home. We just kind of like to get out and just kind of see the world and see what else is out there.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
I guess let's pivot and talk a little bit more professionally.
Okay.
So how long have you been the prosecutor now?
So I've been at the prosecutor's office since 2020.
Okay.
I moved down here with her actually in March of 2020, right before COVID hit. And so we moved in and then things shut down and then we were quarantined together. So,
right.
But I started at the prosecutor's office on June 1st of 2020. And then, like I said earlier, I worked with Mr. Duston as his chief assistant from the beginning of 2021 until he passed in May of 2023. I was the interim for about a month, and then the Taney County judges unanimously appointed me in June of 2023 to fill out the rest of his term as prosecuting attorney.
And that brings us to here.
And here we are.
Gotcha. Go ahead and, I don't know, talk about the job, how things have been going. How do you feel like things in Taney County have been going?
Sure.
Since you've taken over.
Yeah. So, beginning with taking over and having that whole experience even before, Mr. Dustin actually even passed.
Right.
We as an office went through a lot. We knew about the end, probably I say end of the year, probably first part of the year, that he was ill, and we didn't know necessarily the outlook, but knew that kind of things were going on, and he wasn't feeling himself and that sort of thing. And he had already actually gone through cancer once and was able to come out on the other side, and went into remission, and he came back to work, and which, testament to him. I wasn't in the office at the time, but people have told me basically, and he's told me himself, he was undergoing cancer treatments in Springfield basically, and then coming into the office, even if it was just a little bit late. So he was fully dedicated, and he was there, as much as he could be.
Well, sure. Well, I'm sure that stress didn't help the cancer treatment at all. I hear that can kind of make that worse. Loosely scientifically, I don't really bro science.
Yeah, right.
But yeah.
So he had gone through it, and then he had started up again with his second battle with it. Went in for a surgery, and then just unfortunately never came out of the hospital. So, while that was going on, there was me and two other office members that kind of knew what was going on. He didn't really want us to say anything, understandably so. I think he wanted kind of some privacy while that was going, and basically just told the people that needed to know. So we kept the office afloat. He was still, cognitively making decisions and kind of running the office while he was in the hospital until he couldn't anymore. I would go visit him, and most of the time it was for personal, but sometimes I'd have to take, documents for him to sign, or, ask him about things while I was up there. And so then, as an office, when you go through something like that, obviously it's trying, number one. Number two, it brought us, I think, a lot closer together just as a staff, having to kind of go through that. So the transition was both hard and, I'm not going to say easy, but having been in the office during that time and kind of stepping in when he wasn't physically there,
right,
and doing those things, I was almost kind of used to it when the time came. Obviously it's way different once the appointment happens and then it's official and that sort of thing. But it was an interesting transition to try to pick up those pieces. Basically, it was. He was somebody that obviously you're not going to fill the shoes of. The best you can do is just try to do the best you can, in that situation. So there were a lot of things that I kind of had to figure out on the fly, without any sort of mentorship, going into the position. So that was the difficult part of it. Otherwise, on the business side and the practice side of things, it was just kind of business as usual, and let's keep the office moving forward.
Right.
To make sure we're not getting to a point where, things are kind of getting out of control after his loss, and just do the best we can to, mourn that loss while we're also kind of picking up the pieces and moving on. So, and I hate to say the term moving on, because that kind of plays it down a little bit, but just moving forward, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of back to my question really is like, how can I put it better? How do you feel like things are going, and what kind of metrics would you point to say that you are doing a good job, and that people should vote for you to continue to do the good things you're doing?
Sure. Sorry, I think I got wrapped up on the first part of that.
No, you're good. I didn't quite phrase it, to really more pointedly that. But
no, that's okay. So since I've taken over, we have had, and I know, this has been talked about quite a bit, and it's nothing that, we're hiding from or anything. We've ended up with a backlog of cases. So that is the result of basically every year since I've taken over, we have had 1,000 more referrals from law enforcement than we have the year before. On top of that, the staffing really hasn't changed as far as the attorneys are concerned. So when I talk about kind of staffing, it's going to be in reference to attorneys. Our support staff is great. There's not been hardly any turnover there. We've had a retiree, and that's been about it in the last few years. So the support staff.
And when you say referrals, you mean like that's 1,000 new cases more than the previous year every
sent
year?
Sent over from law enforcement.
Gotcha.
So if your staff, if your attorney staff is staying where it's at, but you constantly get 1,000 more, around 1,000 more every year, I think it's inevitable that you're going to end up with some sort of backlog, because it's just not, we're not talking about 50 or 100 where you can maybe divide it up, work a little bit extra, and kind of make up that difference. Once you get 1,000 divided up among, 4 or 5 people at the most, that's a lot of addition that you're having to kind of deal with.
Right.
And that wasn't just one year. It's happened each year since 2023, since I took over.
Sure.
And so, that's concerning, I guess, for, the crime rate in Taney County and kind of what we're facing here on a day-to-day basis. It's also frustrating from our end, because we are having to try to make up that difference without getting people in. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a second, but we've been able to this year bring on 3 new attorneys. I think opportunities have presented themselves that hadn't previously, which I'm extremely grateful for. But in that time, we've been able to cut those referrals down by 1/3. So literally just having more bodies in there, more people to look at, because once that happens, you get people who come out of court who have to run dockets with the judges. We have as many as 4 judges going, I guess. That's not a regular thing, but that can happen when we have a visiting judge. But we do have 3 judges who are here all the time. So we could have, somebody in those 3 courtrooms, and then one person down in the office who's handling search warrants from law enforcement that come in, or 24-hour holds that law enforcement have arrested overnight, and they need to be reviewed within 24 hours to determine if charges are filed. So you're having somebody dealing with the office stuff while the other 3 are in court. You're not going to have the appropriate office time to deal with those additional referrals that are coming in, from law enforcement. So unfortunately, things just kind of did, no matter how hard everybody was working, they were just kind of stacking on top of each other because of the volume that was coming in.
Right. And now the volume is down, you say.
And now the volume is down because we've been able to bring additional people in. So
help me understand that. I guess maybe I'm not quite understanding what a referral means, or is it the amount of referrals per person?
So,
I don't see how, I get more workers in the factory.
Sure.
It doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of widgets that are coming through.
Yeah.
I thought that's what your referrals meant, is the number of things coming in.
So it doesn't reduce the amount coming in,
right?
But it's increasing the rate at which we can review them.
Right. So you say you cut the number of referrals by 1/3?
Oh, I'm sorry. The backlog that we had.
Backlog.
I'm sorry. I didn't say it right.
All right.
So the backlog that we had, we've cut that by 1/3. So the numbers are still coming in from law enforcement.
Got it.
We are just the number
You're
that we
able
had,
to handle it now.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So that backlog has been cut down by 1/3 since the beginning of the year, basically, and really since the end of March or so was when we first started kind of bringing people in. And so since the end of March, we've been able to cut that down by 1/3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess that kind of answers some of the questions. I was going to bring up that Joe Allen yesterday on the podcast was bringing up, I asked him what he would ask you. And one of the things that he kind of touted about himself and that he thinks that you should do is hire more people. It sounds like you have done that already.
Sure.
I guess it's just kind of we haven't had time yet to see what do you say that you haven't really had time to see the numbers bear out the progress that you have made? in regards to that.
I mean, I would say probably fully over a long period of time.
Yeah.
I think when these three individuals came in, we had the opportunity to kind of make a quick blitz and, really get after some stuff.
Right.
We've got 3 additional people that we've not been used to having. So let's kind of attack this, head on. That's not going to be something that we're going to let up on.
Right.
That's going to be something that we're still going to focus on because ultimately the goal, and I don't know that we'll ever get there. I hope that we do, is to have no backlog,
right.
To have no cases. But I think you're always going to have some things under review if you're waiting for things from law enforcement or, things are just, you're kind of waiting for them to finish up their investigation, or you don't have all the pieces that you need and they're doing follow-up that you've requested. So things along those lines. I wouldn't say that we've had the opportunity to have the numbers bear out over a long period of time, but I have no reason to think also that that's not going to continue trending in that direction.
Gotcha.
And that's going to continue to be cut basically as time goes on.
Gotcha.
So, and the difficulty with hiring people is it's not just a Taney County issue. There are prosecutors' offices nationwide who are actually facing an issue because of the lack of people who are interested in public service. And that's for a couple different reasons. You're competing with the workload of a private attorney. They're not taking, near as many cases. And there's I guess kind of more of them also who are spread out, just through our area here and even into Christian County and even in Greene County. There's several, attorneys, at least from the criminal side, who can take criminal cases. The other thing is you're also competing monetarily with them, and within a county budget, you may not have the money to give these people who, own their own firms or work for private firms, who then also have, a higher salary, but also flexibility to, choose their own caseload, or a little bit more flexibility of not having to work as much and kind of establish, I'm not going to have court on Fridays. That sort of thing that, are just, and those are just 2 kind of off the wall examples, but
Sure.
Those are things that we're competing with when we're looking to bring people in.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to get people to come from private practice where they've had some more of those liberties. They're used to making their salary that we may not necessarily be able to 100% match. To come into a world where you're definitely going to be working a lot, and we have somebody on call 24/7, and we rotate that on-call phone as it goes through the office. So the workload's going to increase, but the money may not be able to match it, unfortunately, just operating within the county's budget.
Gotcha.
So it's one of those things that we're always trying. We're always trying to find people that we can bring in.
Right.
To come in and fill these voids. And of course you want experienced people, and that's going to be your top priority, is to get those people. That may not always work out. And so that's been kind of one of those things that we've kind of juggled with over the past few years, since I took over, of trying to find some experienced people, but then also bringing in qualified people at the same time, even though they may not have as much experience. So it's kind of a juggling act.
Sure. I am kind of curious what you think about Joe Allen's other comment. He mentioned that one of the things he would do as prosecutor is he would go to the county and basically plead for more money. Have you done that? I don't know how much more money you have gotten, or if there is any left on the table. I imagine that at least you probably wouldn't think so. I don't know. Could you go into that a little bit?
Sure.
About the budget side?
Yeah. So every year we get sent our kind of spreadsheet from the auditor, and that's our budget request for the year. It contains all of our current employees, and then we also have the ability to ask for additional money.
Yeah.
If we so choose to do, whether that be, salary increases for your staff that you already have, or the potential of creating new positions. So every year since I've taken over, I've budgeted for an extra position, in hoping that we're able to bring people in.
So you've asked every year.
I've asked every year. Yeah, every year we go into the budget for the next year with, here's our staff that we have right now, and then an open position that's got money attached to it.
Gotcha.
And so they have also, I've spoken with them on multiple occasions, because they understand how important our office is and how important it is to get good prosecutors in the office. And so I've had conversations with them where they say, if something comes up and you're, need to not work things around, but like if we need to kind of look at some numbers again and you find somebody who's worth it, we might be able to revisit that. And so it's always been something where I'm planning for an open position because I'm always looking for somebody to bring in. And so I want that money to be there when I go to this person and I'm ready to make an offer. I know I've got the money already there because I've budgeted for it and I know it's there. So then I can have that in my back pocket and not have to be like, well, we'll see if I can go to the commission and get the money approved for this. I know it's already there. So that's something that we've had conversations about. They've been willing to work with me. And they also understand that the people that we're bringing in as far as attorneys are concerned have specialized degrees. Mm-hmm. And, they're going to take a little bit more money to get them in the door. So the money has been there and it's been budgeted for. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You also need to have the interest and the people who are willing to make that shift from private practice into the government world. And the county operates the whole county's budget. So on the wider scale, they're dealing with my office, but also the sheriff's office and road and bridge and everybody else so while we can ask for more money, and I have done so, they also have their framework of the entire county and things that they need to take care of in other areas. They kind of limit it. So they're willing to work with me, but at the same time, it's not limitless on that side of things.
Sure. Where do you want to see this? Well, obviously you want to get the case log, the backlog worked down to nothing is what your goal is. But what other kind of markers of success could people look at for your office or failure? Joe Allen mentioned that, a good prosecutor should not bring a case unless it's basically surefire and you can convict. And he mentioned and criticized you for losing several cases and having to reach out to the district attorney general,
yeah,
excuse me, for help in a case that was a hung jury. Would you care to elaborate on those points? And yeah,
sure. And I'll start kind of where you ended, and I'll start with the most recent case with that happened regarding the Famous Dave's shooting in their parking lot on May 29th of 2021. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of, I guess, clear that situation up a little bit, the Attorney General was actually involved in August of 2023. So they've been on the case.
Gotcha. It wasn't you that brought them in.
We brought them in, but that is a service, or maybe not a service, but that's something that they do all across the state of Missouri. Mm-hmm. So their office is there to assist in criminal cases. Yeah. It was something that actually Mr. Duston was trying to get off the ground before he passed, and I think it had a lot to do with staffing issues, because obviously on a big case like that, most of your cases you're going to have two prosecutors in the courtroom while the trial is going. Obviously, with a huge case like that, just with the volume of evidence and documents and everything that needed to be gone through, if you're dedicating two of your attorneys to kind of combing through that as much as they can, since it's so much for one person to go through, it's obviously going to take time and then kind of eat into the referrals that you get and the office time that you have to do kind of those other things so you can try to prevent that backlog and things like that to keep the office going. So he was looking to get that established. I carried it across the finish line after he passed, and they actually entered their appearance in August of 2023. So the Attorney General's office has been on the case this entire time.
Gotcha.
They were on the case when we had the mistrial in January, and then they were on the case whenever we won the trial last week. So they've been involved the entire time. So that wasn't something where, hey, we had a hung jury, so now let's go back to the drawing board and call in the Attorney General's office. That's not what happened.
Gotcha.
And with their assistance, when we first had that conversation, and they've assisted several other cases with our office too, and they basically come in and they ask you a question, and it's how do you want us to assist? Because they have three different ways that they can help you. They can either take the case completely from you and they handle it just internally, and then the local prosecutor has no more involvement in it. They can do what's called a true assist, where we basically split the work 50-50. They're working on stuff, we're working on stuff, and that's what we did in this case, is we split the witnesses half and half. not to get into like the logistics of the trial too much, but I did jury selection. The assistant attorney general, Paige Wheeler, who was helping us, she did opening statements. We split the witnesses 50-50, and then I did the closing argument in that case. So, I mean, that was kind of their true assist is what they call it.
Gotcha.
And then they can also come in and be completely just a second chair where they really don't do much. They're just there to kind of be procedural help, or if somebody needs assistance, they'll jump in if necessary. So they've got kind of those three different ways that they can help out. And like I said, we've got them on a couple other cases, and it's beneficial because it helps other people in the office kind of take their time to do other things. And if we have this, in my opinion, if we have this great resource here that we can tap into to ensure, assistance down here in Taney County, that things are going well, that we're presenting the best case that we can. It's not, in my opinion, I don't think that's any sort of sign other than I want to make sure the best job is done on these cases for Taney County. And if the Attorney General can help us out with that, then I'm all for it. And they obviously have limits on their attorneys and what their caseloads are and that sort of thing. But again, that's something that they bounce all over the state doing at that point in time. And then just quickly, the other thing on that is I've also heard from some people I think the misconception that a hung jury is a lost trial. That's not the case. Basically, it's not a loss. If it was a loss, it would have been a not guilty. Mm-hmm. It's basically the opportunity to do the case again at that point in time. I think that we had, once the jury's released, you have the ability to talk to them. And I think, we didn't get exact numbers, but I think our impression from talking to some of the jurors the first time around, I think we had 10 guilties and maybe one or two people that were holding out. So we had 10 or 11 who were on board for guilty, and then one or two that were holding out, which again, it has to be unanimous. So right. That, and they, came to the decision that they were hopelessly deadlocked, I think was their exact phrase, and they weren't going to be able to make a decision. And then obviously the second time around last week, we were able to get a conviction on all 6 counts charged. So, it between the two, I guess if you want to kind of look at the numbers of it, you had, 22, 23 people out of the 24 between the two juries that were guilty. They were on our side, but again, it's got to be unanimous. So, that doesn't, it's not a loss. It's just they couldn't make up their decision and they couldn't come to a decision unanimously. So
sure,
we had the opportunity to try the case again and basically start over at ground zero. So after talking about kind of the big one, I think pie in the sky goal would be to not have any referrals. Again, with that volume, I don't know that that's
losses, or you mean referrals?
Yeah, the referrals from law enforcement, kind of going back. Sorry, to the
and no backlog.
No backlog. Yeah, no backlog.
Right.
Yeah, sorry. I'll try to quit interchanging my phrases here. But yeah, to try to to not have a backlog, to not have those hanging over your head.
Right.
That's obviously the main goal. I don't know that we'll ever get fully there, but that would be nice.
You say you're down to a third. What's the roughly the number of cases that you have backlog right now?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. It's been a while since I ran it. I think the last time I looked at it, I think we had about 1,200, referrals kind of hanging out there. And so now we're down to about 800.
Okay.
So, and again, that's, we've got 4 attorneys in the office right now, who are splitting that basically. So you've got...
It's getting worked down as we speak.
Yeah. You've got the cases that are filed that you also have to deal with for preliminary hearings and trials and things along those lines. And then you also have to, balance your time to look at these referrals to make sure that they get reviewed as well, to cut down that backlog. Right. So, again, and that's probably a number that I think I ran maybe about a month ago or so, as far as how far we've cut it down. So it could have fluctuated a little bit at this point in time. We could be a little bit further down. But I know the staff we have in there now is hard at work and trying to get that taken care of. Because again, pie in the sky goal is that we don't have any, but if we can make it as small as possible, that's our goal while also handling, our other business.
Gotcha.
So, I think too, we've had several juries convened since I took over. Quite a few have been tried, by assistant prosecutors in the office. I know I've tried a few. We also had a 30-year-old cold case that we got a conviction on last March from an incident that happened in 1992 at Henning Park in Branson. Had some leads at the time that dried up. The Highway Patrol stayed with it throughout this time frame, and as DNA technology advanced, the Highway Patrol kind of kept going back and testing things and running samples and looking for a match, essentially. They got a lead from a genetic genealogy company in 2022, and they were able to come up with a match with some DNA. A lot of times we tell people that, the cases that we do aren't necessarily like TV. This one kind of was.
Yeah.
Because they followed him to a rec center and got a discarded cup out of the trash and sent it to the lab and got DNA off the straw. And then we're able to match it to him, and we got that conviction in March of 2023, and he was sentenced to life last July. So, I think some other things would just be getting some more attorneys in the office. I mean, again, obviously you're looking for experienced people. We've been able to do that so far this year. But that isn't always the case. Like I said, we can't always get people who are willing to come from the private field.
Right. And then you run up into the budget. Yeah, into
public service. So, we've had to, and I'm not even going to say get creative, but we've hired a couple people who have been right out of law school. One of which actually did an internship with our office. And in Missouri, you can practice under a supervising attorney before you actually have your license. It's called Rule 13. And he actually did that and was able to try a couple misdemeanor jury trials before he even passed the bar and got his law license. And then he had a job with our office for a while. So, sometimes we've had to go to the newer attorneys to try to get people in the office. But, my goal is still the same, whether they're a lot of experience, which again is preferred, or if we are hiring somebody who's right out of law school, just fresh off the bar, we also want to make sure that they're qualified, that they're going to be, working hard to, learn the law and how to be a lawyer and do that practice of law, basically, that we, engage in every day. And sometimes it may take some time to kind of get used to the system and that sort of thing, but we're also not putting people in situations where they're kind of doomed for failure, either. So It's kind of walking along with them as they're learning and putting them in situations that they're going to succeed.
I want to ask you about mercy and judgment, because you have a lot of power over that as a prosecuting attorney for Taney County, right? You can make deals with people. You can, vehemently chase after things. What do you prioritize with your judgment and your mercy? What are things you would let go, and what are things you would chase down?
So, I mean, I think first of all, I think the main thing that we're after is justice.
Yeah.
And I've told a lot of people that it's not one size fits all. It looks different for different situations. Not every stealing case is going to be treated like every other stealing case. Not every assault case is going to be treated like every assault case. And so they're different things that you factor into when you're making those decisions. And, obviously the more serious offenses, if you have, A felonies or B felonies, you're going after those types of things to make sure that people understand. I mean, most of the time you've got people who are seriously injured or put in harm's way. You also have a couple of the distribution charges for drugs that are, getting up to those levels of felonies. So obviously with the more serious things, you're wanting to try to track as much down as you can. But that doesn't necessarily stop with those either, because while it may only be able to charge a Class A misdemeanor assault, that doesn't mean that, the victim on the other end deserves any less attention than somebody who's, had a serious physical injury from theirs. Because they're all going through things that are likely some of the worst experiences of their lives.
Right.
I mean, they're on the other end. So we look at taking the victim's input into account. We've had some people, I just want money. I had something stolen from me. I didn't get it back. I want money. That's my main goal. Other people, I want them sent to prison and locked away for a long time, and that's their goal. And so we just take those accounts and take those desires into consideration when we're thinking about what is the most appropriate path forward for this. A lot of times we end up domestic violence is a big thing that we're seeing a lot of, and it's not necessarily just boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. It could also be a child on their parent or something along those lines. And obviously there's the emotional component there they really need help. They're bad when they're on their drugs or when they're on their alcohol. Something along those lines, so they need to get help. Now, again, if it's serious enough, then we're going to listen to them, but it may be more appropriate, even though their wishes are, we just want them to get help. I mean, the appropriate place for that help may be the Department of Corrections. It may not be the traditional help that you would think of in the community with programs, whether they be drug rehab programs or, batters and intervention programs, things along those lines, because they do have programs in the Department of Corrections. There's treatment facilities and all that stuff that they can go to. So we balance the interests of the community and protecting the community as well as the victims in those situations and trying to figure out what is the most appropriate outcome for this case. And like I said, it's not going to be the same on every front. Just because we have a stealing case here and a stealing case here, those outcomes may look totally different.
Sure. Joe Allen feels very strongly about drugs. And that's one thing he's really kind of harping on. Do you feel like you've been particularly light on drug cases, or he really wants to go after distributors and manufacturers, is what he says.
Sure.
How big of a problem is that in our community still? I mean, I know it was back a while.
Yeah.
But, I mean, is it still that bad? How bad is it?
Yeah, so I would say... personally, I don't think manufacturing is as big of an issue as it used to be.
Yeah.
The distribution is kind of more where law enforcement is targeting their efforts at this point in time. I know that they are working hard to try to get these things before they get either into the county or too far into the county. I've personally, and I know my other assistant attorneys have as well, we've done several search warrants where they've gotten information from people if they're going out of state or out of town to get these drugs basically and bring them back into the area. So with that information, they can go ahead and get search warrants, kind of be watching and be waiting. And then as soon as they know, they're at the location that the warrant's for, then they already have it in their hand basically. So then they can go execute it at that point in time. So the distribution is more of a problem than in manufacturing, and I know law enforcement's working hard on making those things.
As I understand it, there was a huge crackdown on manufacturing back in 2003, 4. I don't know the year specifically, but early 2000s, it was a big crackdown.
Yeah,
all the manufacturers, as far as I'm aware, pretty much skipped town or just quit making them in place, and the resident stayed here.
Yes,
and then the cartels swept in and just brought in the extra hard criminal crystal meth. Excuse me. But so it's unfortunate to hear that that's still kind of a huge issue.
Yeah,
but
it is.
That's kind of more what I thought it was, and
it
was
is
odd to me to hear him say that he was going to go after the manufacturers, but I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, that's the root of, I think, a lot of people's problems. But I don't think it's necessarily the root of the problem in general.
Yeah,
it plays a big part. But not. Are there a lot of theft cases that result from people being on drugs? Yes. I mean, are there also a lot of theft cases that result from people being homeless and not having the needs the means to go get the basic needs? Because we don't just see I'm gonna get high and go take a TV. We also see the people who go in and are stealing $50 worth of groceries just because they're trying to eat. So there's a wide range of of things that I think drugs can play into it, but I also think there's other issues that such as the homelessness that kind of factor into that as well.
Gotcha.
And there are, a lot of it's getting brought in from either out of town, the major metropolitan areas, St. Louis, Kansas City, are the two main ones, at least I think, here in the state, or from out of state, or even from out of the country, where they've kind of filtered their way up here and made it to here for people who are then going to distribute them. And so that's what I was kind of touching on earlier with law enforcement getting this information, and they've been proactive to get these people before they get it too far in the county. So and obviously to execute the search warrant, they have to be within the bounds of Taney County. But they're trying to get them before it can make its way out and, really do any damage or end up in the hands of, anyone, but certainly the wrong people, who have no business being around that kind of stuff.
Sure. I brought this up yesterday, and I want to bring it up again. What are your opinions on flock type cameras? I need to make a correction as well, because yesterday I mentioned flock cameras and that we have some flock cameras. That's not true. As far as I understand it, I talked with the police chief, and he told me that the ones in Stone and Taney County are by a different company called Genetech, if I'm not mistaken. But they are allowed by the Fourth Amendment. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily really truly have a right to privacy, in the way that some people think we maybe ought to. But are cameras that are tied into an AI network something that we ought to have, in your opinion?
So I think that's kind of a loaded question.
Sure.
As of right now, I think the court rulings have said that they don't violate the Fourth Amendment, and I think that what they're essentially likening it to is basically an officer themselves running, license plates as they're out running radar or checking registration, things along those lines.
Right.
However, personally, I think that they are a valuable tool that can be used to be beneficial to solve crimes.
Yeah.
One case, I know there was a theft case that I think the city of Branson, that's basically all, they had some information from, I'm not even going to say an eyewitness, but an individual on who it might be and gave a description of a vehicle that they may be driving. And that was basically the only piece of information that they had to go off of in that situation. So I think, obviously they still have to do their investigation, and it doesn't end there with, oh, so-and-so said you did it, you were in this area, so open and closed. But that gives them the lead to then do their investigation.
Right.
I also know that from an ATM case that we had in Branson where somebody stole money from one of the, I believe it was Branson Bank, I could be wrong, but one of the bank ATMs in Branson, they had actually tracked the movements of an individual who had been hitting ATMs basically from the West Coast into the center. And they actually were able to look at some funds that were stolen and basically trace them back to Oklahoma as well. So then that kind of gets into maybe federal charges on that front. I think they can be a useful investigative tool as long as they don't start overreaching and get to the point of we're doing too much and we're tracking people when we shouldn't and that sort of thing. So I think they can be beneficial, but I think there needs to be probably a line established to where we don't go over that, and then they start getting into things that they don't need to be basically getting into and tracking and that sort of thing.
Sure. And I realize that you don't have any necessarily control or say over it in Taney County even, but, it's just kind of a hot button political topic right now, and I'm just kind of curious your opinion on it.
Yeah, certainly. Again, I think that they can be beneficial, but I certainly don't want to see them also overreaching to where we are violating the Fourth Amendment now.
Right.
I mean, that's...
In your opinion, when do we hit that line that it's too much?
I mean, I think just by the rule of the law and the amendment itself, when you start getting into places or situations where people do have that expectation of privacy, and then that's kind of jumping over that line and getting it violated. On the roads, I think the court's ruled right now that we basically, as a traveler, you're kind of putting yourself on the roads, you're in public, you're being seen. Right. But if we get to the point where it starts doing too much or getting to that point where that expectation of privacy is now violated, then obviously they've crossed that line, and then something needs to be readdressed and figured out moving forward.
Sure. If, I've heard about a couple of cases where AI flock cameras specifically, the brand Flock, has misread license plates, and it's resulted in wrongful arrest cases. What would something like that look like if someone were to have a mistaken license plate and were treated poorly by the police? What kind of lawsuit could Taney County be looking at in that scenario? Yeah,
so I think anybody who has I'm not going to say negative interaction with law enforcement, but something that kind of goes to that point where
Sure.
they are mistreated or something along those lines. There's the civil route. I think that they could go with the civil rights, the 1983, Section 1983 claims, basically that your rights were violated. And that would be the avenue to go if there's some sort of issue there. That would be on the civil side of things. They could, kind of tying it into our world and the criminal world, you can get things expunged from your record. So obviously that was a process that, the individual would have to do on their own, but that would be an avenue because once that arrest is made, it's there. But you can certainly get that taken off if it was a mistaken, identity type of thing. But I would say those would probably be the civil route as far as the Section 1983 and the civil rights, filing one of those, or possibly the expungement would be kind of the two realms that I would think they would have, some sort of relief basically in a situation like that.
Gotcha. I guess I'm just kind of curious more about a particular case I heard about where there was a wrongful arrest. This particular individual in XYZ state, can't remember what state. It's been a minute, but he sued the county for like $1 million or whatever, and he got a bunch of money. Could that happen to Taney County?
I mean, I guess theoretically,
sure.
I think anything can happen, depending on
right. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think the answer would be that it could. I mean, obviously, a lot of this stuff kind of depends on the specific circumstances, and the situations and things along those lines.
And how the situation was actually handled.
What exactly
by the
happened.
Officers. Yeah. So I suppose it doesn't necessarily have to reflect on the cameras themselves, but all I know is that as far as flock cameras go, and again we have Genetech. I don't know how their contract structure works, but with flock, they are leased to the county, and the county's responsible for them, and they have no recourse in their contract, despite the flock camera being at fault for misreading the license plate. It was a 7 as a 2, if I remember correctly. But anyway, I don't know how Genetech is.
Yeah.
But it's just something that I'm mildly concerned about, and I think a lot of people in the community are concerned about the march forward, the next step forward of the mass surveillance system of America. But we've already come so far.
Yeah.
You can already track cell phones. You can already track based off the cell phone tower pings and everything else. I mean, that's been going back to the early 2000s when we could do this type of thing, and it's nothing new.
Right.
It's just more visible.
Sure. And it's a different type. I mean,
it's a different type.
Yeah.
It's searchable. It's also hackable, but that's a different subject. I also don't know how good Genetech is compared to Flock, but Flock is particularly egregious. They don't even have two-factor, or they didn't.
Interesting.
And I don't know. It's pretty rough. But
yeah, and I mean, since it's a new issue, I mean, I know Branson PD has had them for a while. Like I said, the couple cases that I spoke of, I know they've used them in those instances. I don't personally. I mean, again, I don't see necessarily every report that comes in our office, but it's not very frequently where I'm seeing that as a basis for some sort of investigation.
Right.
Where I'm seeing Flock or Genetech or anything like that coming up in police reports. So
gotcha.
While I mean it's a new issue, and I think it will continue to be both litigated and explored and researched a little bit more. And I know it's one thing that I think we will continue to probably do research on as well, especially if there tends to be more in the county or something along those lines, and something that we might be seeing more of. We'll definitely get informed on kind of where the issues are, what the court rulings are, and where we're at in that whole process.
Sure. I want to bring up the Frizzle and McDonald case. I've seen a couple comments on Facebook saying that they cannot vote for Brad Hughes because, because they're involved in the case. They're family members of the case. And they're very upset that progress hasn't been making fast enough headway, in their opinion. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so, I made a post on social media not too long ago kind of addressing both of those issues. They're very similar, but also they each kind of have their own components as well.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I mean, I'll say that anytime that somebody loses a life in Taney County, I mean, we take those issues very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing that we overlook or don't want to deal with. I mean, obviously, we know that there's, the individual that lost their life. Not only do they have family, but they have friends and other loved ones who obviously are unfortunately never going to get that person back.
Mm-hmm.
I can also say that, and I said something similar in my post, there's also a lot of moving parts when you get something like that, even if it is the result of a traffic crash. The highway patrol comes in, they do a really good job of having a reconstructionist at the scene who then will take measurements, take pictures, the grade of the road. I mean, they do all sorts of stuff, and then they write their reconstruction report. Sometimes those take a while, unfortunately, to do. They're very technical. I don't know. I can't speak on how many reconstructionists they have throughout the state, but that is a very specialized position within the patrol. But they do a very good job of writing those reports, but sometimes it takes a while. They also go in and download, black boxes from the vehicles and that sort of thing. So you get a lot of technical data that end up in those reports. If they take a while, sometimes our hands are kind of tied. And I've seen them typically, I mean, we're waiting, 7, 8, 10 months before we get them. And so it kind of puts us in a difficult position because we also just kind of have to wait. Because
right.
the other
and
side,
it looks poorly on you. It looks like you have a
Sure.
backlog when you don't necessarily in these particular cases.
Right. So they
Yeah.
they may be, quote unquote sitting there, but that doesn't mean that they're not, on the forefronts of our minds or that nothing's being done on them.
Mm-hmm.
But we, along with our office, we have to make sure that the highway patrol's done everything that they need to do and get us that information. The other thing is too, is that we don't want to, in those types of serious situations where we are waiting on things like that, we don't want to jump the gun and do something that then can't be undone later. And so that kind of plays into it as well. I think both of those cases, they have been filed at this point in time. I can say, and we've been in contact with the family, both Mila's mother and Christian's mother as well, just kind of giving them updates on the status of the case and what's going on and kind of how the process works moving forward. I will say also in Mila's case, and I think I put this in my post as well, but we were still working with the juvenile office and in contact with them.
Mm-hmm.
About some different things, and that's another moving part that goes into her case. So while they're similar, she has kind of that extra component of kind of things that we need to deal with and make sure that we dot every T and cross every I, and that we do everything that we can, because certainly, we want justice for them. We want to hold people accountable. When we file these charges, I mean, that's the goal of filing charges in the first place. And so they have been filed. We are moving forward, and it simply just kind of took a long time, unfortunately, because of all those moving parts that are involved in situations like that. So, and again, that's not uncommon for us to wait a while on reconstruction reports.
Something else I wanted to bring up. You were a public defender, right? And Joe currently is a defense attorney. And you both, I'm sure, have defended your share of clearly guilty and more malevolent characters, let's say. There are some people on the internet that are concerned about voting for Joe because he is currently defending a pedophile. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, and I'm kind of curious if you could speak on this. Is that a reason that people should not vote for Joe, and or you in this case? It seems as though it is an unfortunate thing that must take place, that people have to be defended that are morally reprehensible. But I'll just let you take the floor on that.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Joe and where his head at, and obviously I would love people's support.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I want to keep doing this for the next 4 years. That's why I signed up for election, to keep doing this, because since I've been appointed, it's it's something that I've loved doing and something that I want to keep doing. So I'm not going to, get into that realm necessarily. I can speak from my perspective.
Yeah.
And having been a public defender, and I talked about this early on, when I decided I wanted to make that shift, that was it for me. I didn't want to keep defending people anymore. I wanted to protect the people who had been victimized by those that had charges brought against them. And so that is my goal, and that is why I made that transition when I did. And again, that was in 2020, so 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I made that decision to go into this with, I'm going to help the people who have been victims of the crimes, who are going through the worst experiences of their lives. I mean, for some people that could be, like we touched on earlier, it could be an assault 4th degree. For some people it could be their child's been victimized by someone else. So that's for me personally, that's where my shift came from. That's where my heart is at this point in time, and it's been there for the last 6 years.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to get off your chest? I'm coming up short a little bit, honestly. Anything else you want the public to know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could just kind of like what I touched on there. I really have a passion for this job.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, we've kind of talked a lot about kind of the moving parts that we've had to deal with, and the short staff and everything that we've done. I've worked tirelessly to try to make this office the best that it can be, and we've had the backlog that's come up, but we're also making efforts to get that knocked down, so that we can effectively serve this community. I've built a relationship with law enforcement over the years. I've built a relationship with the judges over the years, in this capacity, and I think that's important too. I think that we're at a time right now with, again, the rising crime rate, about how it's going up every year.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at a point right now where I think continuity is important. And that was something that I said back when Mr. Duston passed and I had applied for this position. It was myself and about 5 other attorneys that applied at the time. And that was something that I wanted to focus on, because it was important that somebody was in the office that knew the staff, knew how the office operated, knew the procedures, knows the system, because we use a specialized system for prosecutors that's developed by a certain company, and we're making some changes. We're in the middle of kind of having a transition in that system as well. So that's going to be another thing that's added onto my plate as we're moving forward. But familiarity with that system as that goes through that transition, and just the continuity of the office to stay basically on track. I know that people, as you've alluded to, will say things about certain cases, and I'm open to explaining those things, because I want people to know how the system works, mm-hmm. and how our office operates. And actually, one of the things I've kicked around and briefly mentioned to a couple different people is to have some sort of either our own kind of prosecutors citizens academy, kind of like the law enforcement offices do, or if we can maybe just tack on a week or two at the end of theirs to kind of say, hey, you've sat through all this time of how law enforcement does their job. Here's the next step once it comes to our office.
Yeah,
so
that would
people
be
just
interesting.
yeah, so people just understand, because there's a lot of nuances to it, that it's not just open and shut a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
We have those decisions to make. They're heavy decisions, and we know that once you file a charge, that kind of gets the ball rolling, and it's not going to be the same for that person. And I don't think I certainly don't, and nobody in my office takes that decision lightly. And so when we analyze cases, we look at it to see, hey, do we believe we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's the standard that we look at as we go through it. And I have competent assistant attorneys in the office. I've certainly tried, a couple big cases that we talked about earlier. And so, I think we're all competent and talented enough to do the job. And they all have hearts, and myself included, to protect this community, to keep this community safe, and continue to fight crime basically as we move forward. And, whether that looks like continuing to work with law enforcement to try to stop these drug distributions before they get into the county, or whether it's to, work with the city of Branson. I went to a meeting with them not too long ago, and some of the business owners in downtown Branson, because they were concerned about some of the people who were down there, and I guess, outbursts they were having and issues they were causing with not only, driving people away from their business, but also there's been a couple of business owners who have been assaulted down there as well. So, working with them to try to get that cleared up. There's a financial crimes group in the area that I know we're going to start being more active in. I've been to a couple of their meetings, but being more active there to figure out what's going on the financial side. We're seeing a lot more ATM thefts that we've seen before. We've seen a lot of, deceit, people taking money from other people, from vulnerable people through scams and that sort of thing. So, whatever the case may be, I mean, we've got people in our office, and it starts with me at the top, who want to make this community as safe as possible. It's my home, it's their home, it's your home. And we want to make sure that everybody who lives here and visits here is going to be as safe as possible while they're here in Taney County. And that's going to continue to be our goal moving forward. And hopefully I'm able to do this for another 4 years. My heart is in the job. Once I made my decision to come over to the office, I've never looked back. It's been something that, I really enjoy doing. And I just want people to know that everything that we do, it comes from a place of care, because I care about this place. I may not have grown up here, may not have been here 20 or 30 years, but I chose to make this my home in 2020 whenever I moved here. And I love it here, and anything that I can do in this position to continue to, again, keep it safe is my top priority. So we're going to continue to work hard on finding people to bring into the office so that we can, have more manageable caseloads, so that we can, make sure that we're devoting the time and attention needed to each case. And that gets done anyway, but, it makes it a little bit easier when your caseload's not as high. So the more people we can draw in here, the more experience we can have, the better we can protect the community. And that's our ultimate goal.
That was a really good last word, and I hate to do it, but I got to ask one more thing, because I asked Joe, and I want to give you the opportunity as well. Obviously I can't talk to Joe tomorrow, but of course he had some questions for me to ask you. Do you have any questions or thoughts about your opponent, Joe or Tony Williams? I'm attempting to get him on the podcast as well, but I have been unsuccessful so far in my outreach to him. But
not necessarily. I mean, I think that we're all three different, and I don't know. I know Joe's been practicing a long time. I mean, both of them admittedly have been practicing longer than I have. But I have the most experience in the office, at this point in time. The past 6 years having been there. So,
a good way to put it is probably that you would, well, I think you said it earlier, that you would keep the best continuity moving forward.
Yeah. And I think, and again, I think that's super important.
Yeah.
And I think it's maybe more important than people realize. Maybe people agree with me, I don't know, but I think that's probably one of the most important things, because, if a transition happens, which again, obviously I hope it doesn't, but if a transition happens at some point in time, there's going to be somebody who now has to learn everything.
Right.
You
starting back from scratch, and it may take them, a month, 2 months to really get everything spun back up.
Yeah. And I mean, practicing criminal law is one thing, being on the defense side. I mean, I can tell you the transition that I had, it was a little bit easier because criminal law, and
right. You're already integrated with the office.
Yeah. And can make that kind of transition. But even when I came over from defense, I mean, it's still a learning curve to try to figure out, how cases work on this side and the amount of work that goes into them and that sort of thing. So all the way back in 2020 when I made the move, and then, I know, having judicial experience is something that I don't have. But it's also, again, it's just different on the prosecution side of things, of putting a case together, getting it ready for trial, and all the work that kind of goes in behind the scenes, along with, running the office and dealing with the county commission for the budget, and, managing a support staff of 11 with victim advocates and, legal assistants and that sort of thing. And then whatever prosecuting attorneys that you have also under your watch. So yeah, I think the continuity is super important, because it takes out any sort of learning curve that's going to have to happen. You already have somebody in there who knows how the office works, how prosecution is done, from actually, doing it. and then the systems and processes and that sort of thing. And of course, we're paperless, and you mentioned AI earlier. That's kind of getting integrated into some of the things like for case law research and things along those lines, where that's a tool that can be used, but it's something that's there.
Right. Yeah, you got to be careful with that. I hear sometimes AI has a tendency to just want to please the user and will generate a case out of thin air and will cite it like it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and then that's why you always do your follow-up and make sure you can find the case.
Right. Yeah. I go to the sources in the Wikipedia article. But
but I mean, all those technological things are advancing in that direction. And, there's a couple, I mentioned our system earlier. We're making a couple changes that are essentially going to be required. So, we're having to get used to that, and that's going to be more technological based as well. So we're kind of shifting into that. So, having any sort of change, I think, is just going to kind of cause some sort of disruption. I mean, I think anytime there is change, it does that. But I think with the rising crime rate that we've seen over the past 3 years, and it's not just, hey, I think this is where it's trending. That's what's happened over the past 3 years, unfortunately, with all of the other changes that I just mentioned that are going on. Like, I think that the most important thing is to keep familiarity with the office, with the position, and that continuity, and just to make things run as smoothly as possible, again, for the safety and the well-being of the county.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I was trying to see if there's anything that I didn't touch on. I think I made a couple notes. I might get out my phone here just to see.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so just a couple things.
Good to be thorough.
Yeah, so and these are just a couple of things that I think I've heard kind of while I've been out and about. One of them is about not only the backlog in the office, but also kind of dockets being big. And I know there's been kind of some talk of, prosecutors not being ready or not knowing what's going on or that sort of thing. That's also a product of, I think some of the defense attorney as well not being ready and not necessarily communicating with us. So I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus necessarily, but I don't want it to fall solely on our office. Like, we're not, ready to go. We're not having those communications and that sort of thing. Because it's just, sometimes you just get to the point where cases just aren't being moved because either two sides aren't communicating for whatever reason, or, sometimes the defense attorney will need to reach out to a prosecutor for an offer, or, admittedly, sometimes it's happened where, we get a little busy and we're not able to get them an offer. So it may be our fault. So, it's just the whole system, I think, is kind of at play sometimes when it comes to that sort of thing. But I just didn't want, I've heard that a few times while I've been out and about. And so I just didn't want that necessarily falling solely on our office because, it's not solely our fault, I guess, essentially. So some situations, certainly, and we'll, take the responsibility for that. And I think everybody's good about telling the court, hey, this is my fault. I didn't get back to them. But also sometimes it's from the other side as well. And then the other thing I've heard some is that, talking about jury trials and, not losing them and that sort of thing. And the one thing I would say about jury trials is that they're not easy. The cases
Sure.
that are slam dunks, those are going to end up in a guilty plea.
Right.
Those are the ones that, hey, no brainer, we have no defense here. Or maybe there's a piece of evidence that they feel wasn't collected right or something along those lines. So jury trials are just inherently difficult,
right?
Because there's an issue that the other side feels they need to bring up. The other thing that makes them difficult is you have to have 12 people
right.
agree.
You got 12 cats to herd.
Exactly. And so like we talked about earlier with the famous Dave's case.
Yeah.
I think that was a good situation and a good example of that because we put on basically the same evidence. Our evidence didn't change between January and July.
It was just those two people, for whatever reason, had that temperament that they weren't going to
convict. Exactly. So it's trying to get 12 people to agree on something. And, we found over the years, we've tried, like I mentioned earlier, several jury trials, whether myself or my assistants. And we've found, over the years that they will pick up on little things that may be, minuscule as far as the case is concerned or the elements, but they'll pick up on it and that will be the basis for their decision. Or you may not be able to get, all 12 people to agree on what the outcome may be, or you may have a case that you present the evidence pretty firmly, you feel, and they just don't find in your favor. And that's the difficult part about taking a case to trial, is I think that every case that certainly that I bring to trial, and I think I can speak for my assistants over the years that have taken cases to trial, you believe in your evidence, you believe in your case, and you believe that you can present it and prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. When it gets to a jury, it's up to the 12 people to make that decision. And so that's the difficult part of just having a jury trial just in general. So, some cases are easier than others. And some cases, again, I keep going back to that case that we just won last week. I mean, you have the two people in January that were the holdouts, essentially. And then you try almost, again, our evidence didn't change. So we had the same pieces of evidence that we presented to a jury in July and, got the outcome that we were after. So it's difficult. And I think TV shows make it a little bit more difficult with CSI and Law and Order and things like that. I think people come in with a set of things that they want to see, and if you don't give it to them, they're going to be like, well, there was no DNA, or you didn't have fingerprints or something along those lines, and that just doesn't happen in every case. Mm-hmm. But you may get somebody who feels like that's necessary, and then you're kind of up against it. So those are just, I think, a couple of things that I've kind of heard out and about that I wanted to at least kind of touch on, because I think that there's sometimes some misconceptions on if a trial is lost, it may not necessarily be a reflection on the person that tried the case. It could just be that that's the jury that you got. Mm-hmm. And so that's the, I guess, the beauty of the justice system, is that you have to take it to those people. Yeah. And they get the ability to decide. And, we are held to proving our case beyond a reasonable doubt, but, you have 12 people over there that may not necessarily agree with us. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we've taken a frivolous case to trial or a case that we didn't think we could win. You just may have those people that just don't agree with you. And
sure.
That's sometimes, unfortunately, that's how it is.
Well, Brad Hughes, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. We're going to call it a wrap.
All right. Thank you.